Hello, I am Hilary Hahn, and I am here with...
Max Richter.
And what do you do, Max?
I write music.
And what kind of music?
I do about a million different kinds of things. I guess the simple version is it's kind of classical music, but it's also electronic music, and I make records, and I write concert music. And
You perform as well, right?
I play the piano. I'm a secret pianist.
Not so secret anymore.
I do play the piano.
Nice. How did you get started in music?
I was thinking about this the other day. Someone asked me this question, and I was thinking that I probably was always doing music. I just didn't realise that that's what it was. As a little kid, I always had stuff going on in my head and tunes, and I was sort of building tunes and moving bits of music around in my head. And then only later did I realise that this wasn't normal. And that it, you could actually do this, and it was called composing. So that was kind of an eye opener for me.
How did it manifest first when you were moving these things around in your head? Would you sing it? Did you have a piano at home?
I would sort of hum internally. I knew what a piano was, but our neighbours had a piano, and it was a great big piece of wood which was really tall and sort of rather. I would try to play it with my tiny fingers, and it was a bit painful actually. Sort of all this big object which made huge noises, and I found it in a way a bit disturbing. I was just too little for it.
Yeah.
I had to be sort of helped up onto the chair and stuff, and it was all just a bit much, actually. So I kind of just sort of kept thinking about these things on my own, and then later on I started piano lessons and all the kind of traditional training from there, really.
Did you start, when you started composing, did you start by mimicking composers that you had been working on the piano, or did you just completely separate it from what you were studying?
Well, I was always listening to a very broad range of things. The first things I wrote were probably a kind of, I actually wrote on paper, would be sort of early teens, kind of late romantic music. But around that time I had a sort of strange piece of luck in that the milkman who delivered the milk to our house, he could hear me sort of practicing on Beethoven and all this stuff, and he was a real new music geek, which was, and he was one of these guys who was a composer, but he lived for music, but his day job was delivering the milk. And that was, in a way, it was quite a traditional thing, being a milkman, being a taxi driver, being a plumber, but actually secretly you're a musician. He was one of these guys, and he started dropping off all these experimental records. There'd be the milk and the eggs and the latest Philip Glass sort of on the doorstep. So at this time, this music was incredibly difficult to find. There was no internet. It meant, researching it in a nerdy magazine and driving across country to the record shop that had the record, maybe. And so it was very valuable and very precious. And he really introduced me to all sorts of amazing stuff. So it's really his fault, actually. All of this.
I think that's a good story. How did you get into writing electronic music?
Well, I was listening to all kinds of things. A lot of, in my teens, a lot of the sort of standard 20th century repertoire and sort of more contemporary things. But I was aware there was the sort of punk universe and the electronic universe which were out there as well, and I was listening to all of that. So for me, they always sort of flowed quite naturally together. Also, obviously there was the electronic side of Stockhausen and other kind of university electronic music, which was in a way maybe less of an influence actually rather than people like sort of Kraftwerk and these sorts of more sort of pop culture electronic artists. But the big problem with that was that at the time, when I was trying to do this stuff, I sort of found out about these things called synthesizers and all these kinds of stuff. And but at the time, they cost as much as a sort of car or something. Really just ridiculous.
Yeah.
So it really was something which only people could do who were sort of wealthy, or were mad and had a soldering iron and would try and build these things, of which I was one. So I would, be upstairs in my bedroom with a soldering iron and lots of little resistors and stuff, building these sorts of squeaky, sort of geeky sort of machines. And that's how I got into it, very sort of hands-on.
There's a lot of tech involved in the electronic side of things, I think.
There is. It's sort of a bit of a black art, I think, all that stuff. Yeah, it's. I'm sort of interested in. Really, that's kind of one area of my interest, and that runs in parallel with the kind of academic music background, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you find that the different ways that the different means you have to write with, so electronic, acoustic, you play the piano, you hear things in your head, do they tend to alternate in your awareness, or do you put them all together in one giant pot?
Yeah, they pretty much flow together because, I think of it really as a spectrum of resources. And, composing for me is like trying to sort of chase down an idea and sort of try to understand what it is and how it can live and sort of where it is. And where it falls in that sort of spectrum of possible colours. Some ideas are sort of things which really you want written down for an instrumentalist. It's something which needs really a kind of a human, real-time interpretation in a sense of classical sort of grammar. And other things really have a kind of a machine aesthetic. It may be or more like a found object or. So really it's just sort of trying to find the sort of natural home for each little fragment, where they can live.
Yeah, it's true. It is quite a range of tools to work with, so it's kind of like being a visual artist and having a little bit of this media and some of that media and some of that media. And
thinking that way.
Yeah.
For me that's quite natural.
Do you do visual art as well?
I don't really. No, I don't. I'm interested in visual art, but for me, music is really quite. It's absorbing more than just in an auditory sense. It's more like a sort of it's a sort of a language, and it's also a set of places and narratives, and it's sort of quite. It does encompass a lot of kind of unmusical things as well.
I imagine it keeps you busy enough too.
It does. Yeah. Not a lot of time for the visual arts career.
And so I'm thrilled that you're part of the 27 Pieces project that I'm doing, and
Sure.
I'm just really excited about the piece that you're contributing. So would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Well, yes, the piece is it's a trip through a bit of material which I've been sort of turning over in my mind for a long time, and it's a kind of a song-like lyrical line which sort of coexists with something which feels quite sort of rigorous and geometrical, and maybe almost sort of, it's got a sort of baroque thing. It's built around a chain of suspension. It's a sort of falling, suspended thing. And it's kind of an attempt to make a kind of a beautiful song shape over this quite rigorous sort of, it's a sort of pulsed, in a way, sort of background space. And I just sort of felt like I wanted to write something very direct and kind of simple.
Yeah, I should just mention that I gave you some restrictions, which are a little bit constrictive perhaps, because it had to be between 2 and 5 minutes in length for acoustic violin and piano. And that was actually pretty much it, I think. But, the short form is a whole different ballgame for some styles of composing. Is it comfortable for you?
Yes, I mean, I think materials, they kind of find their own homes, so, I mean, in my case, it's always like, I feel like I'm a sort of butterfly collector, sort of trying to chase that thing down and trying to find something which lives comfortably in that space. So it had to be, I felt, something which was like a song, like almost not like a pop song, but just really had a kind of a direct, simple, lyrical kind of presence.
And how do you connect with the title of a piece? And in this case, any particular information you want to give?
I guess it's like it has a kind of, it's funny, here I am talking about this piece of music, and I do think I'm probably the least sort of qualified person in the universe to talk about it.
But you know where it came from. You're the most qualified to talk about where it came from.
It did, but I don't have any objectivity. I'm sort of, for me, I'm just sort of. The title appealed to me. It seemed to connect with a kind of.
Maybe we should give the title. What do you think?
Yes, the title's Mercy. It has a kind of. The music has a kind of hopefully a kind of warmth. And a kind of, it's quite tender, I think, and this group of material, this sort of world of material that it lives in, is also something which I'm trying to make a bigger piece from, which has a sort of elegiac theme. So that's a connection, I guess, and maybe that's a sort of little spark into it.
Well, do you think when you hear something, you'll be more objective about it, or is it even more subjective experience when you hear your own music as a third person?
Well, I don't know. When I hear things that I've written, I'm always a bit sort of startled, really, because I obviously don't hear them as it were an innocent bystander would hear them.
Right.
I'm really, because every piece is in a way a sort of working through of a set of ideas and an attempt to make sense of them, and mostly, to some extent, unsatisfactorily. It's like there isn't a perfect solution. There's a set of choices through the material. They are provisional, but the ink has to be dry one day, so that's it. That's the version. So. I often find that I'm sort of start thinking, well, there is another trip through that. Actually, we could go this way or this. So yeah, it's interesting to hear them because it's one set of choices which I made over that period of time through that landscape. But there's a million other ways.
Yeah, it's like a recording. You record what it was for you at that time.
Exactly. It is a puzzle, all that actually.
So what else are you working on right now?
What am I doing? I am in the middle of writing a series of mini operas. I'm making a project which is 40 little operas.
Is it a commission or is it some project for yourself?
Yeah, it's a commission from Covent Garden, who we've been working on this for, I guess, about a year or so. It's based on this lovely book by a man called David Eagleman, who has written this book Sum, which is 40 imaginary sort of tales about what happens after you die. So they're like 40 different heavens. And some of them are rather serious, and some are very funny, and some are sort of a bit sort of quizzical. So I'm writing 40 operas at the moment.
Do you have a librettist, or are you doing your own libretto as well?
It's a collaborative sort of mash-up libretto process. So.
It sounds like a very consuming project.
It is. It's good fun. It's good. Yeah,
good.
It's great.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, pleasure to talk with you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.